Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today I am looking at a first submission by Keely of her horse Brisingr, who is a wild horse that she adopted about a year and a half ago. Now, one of the issues that she asked me in her question is that she's having a little trouble bending him from side to side, and that's very normal. Just understand that no horse can really bend until its back comes up. So that's all we worry about. When the horse's back is able to lift correctly and we get to the right place, it will be able to bend. It's pretty much as simple as that. But if you see here, as the horse goes by, in the silhouette there, we can see that this horse is quite dipped downward behind the saddle there, which tells me that the back is not up in the position that it needs to be to allow it to bend. So what we have to do at that point is just continue working on the stretch work, continue getting the horse to lift its back until it does, and then you'll find that the bend will come all by itself. Now, there are many people in the world who will tell you to bend the horse's neck from side to side, but those are people who don't understand where bend comes from. Comes from the middle of the horse's back, underneath where your seat is, not at the neck and shoulder. Any horse can bend its shoulders from side to side, or its neck from side to side, rather, relatively easily. But that has nothing to do with the horse being supple at all. In fact, the idea of bending horses' necks from side to side really is kind of counterproductive and does nothing in terms of getting them to lift their back. So the suppleness is coming that we want is much more in the back itself, in the spinal processes that have to lift up so they can become free, and that allows the horse to bend. But from what I see here in the video, you're doing a lot of work in order to get to that. Once again, we see the horse in silhouette here. You see that big dip behind your saddle there, and that horse has quite a bit of a hunter's bump that it developed somewhere along the way. Now, this horse is only six years old, so it's not a very old horse. So that's a good thing, as you have lots of time to correct it. But the sooner you do, the sooner the horse will bend. So I would have liked to see this horse work on the lunge or work in hand a little more. But the walk work that you're getting is starting to look pretty good. He's starting to stretch pretty actively down. Of course, there he stops to have a little stretch. But just know that you'll answer your own question here. As you get this horse stronger through the back, it will be able to bend much more consistently. But you're off to a good start here in terms of getting this horse to stretch, and compared to looks like a little bit of your problem. The footing looks pretty bad where you are there. It looks hard, and of course it's covered with manure, and it looks like maybe some rocks out there, as you saw him stumbling there a little bit. So just always know yes, we can work horses on most kinds of footing, but we have to be careful about it. We have to, we can't ask for big extended gaits on terrible footing. Things like that. We can work on sort of normal working trots and this sort of thing. But, a horse is never going to be as free and giving of itself if it doesn't trust the footing that it's on. So it makes a big difference to them, and how hard the ground is underneath is what's so important. For those of us who live in the West, I've just moved my horses to a new barn because where we were, the ground was simply too hard. And as we asked the horses to do more work, and to begin to come up, we found that, because the ground was so hard, they started to have foot problems and things like that. So moving to my new barn where we have a really good footing, was built correctly with many gradations of rock underneath it. Our base is about 6 foot deep. So it makes a big difference. You can feel it when you even walk on it. So we have to always keep all that in mind. So if the ground you're working on is, walk across it, you can see how the horse just slipped its back end out like that. Because it couldn't get a good purchase on the footing. So we have to be careful when we work on this kind of footing, and just know that it will be difficult to ever get maximum strides in this sort of thing, because we don't want to push the horse too hard beyond just sort of ordinary balance on this kind of footing that you're on here, and expect the horse to stay sound, because it won't. Just like an athlete, who's working on very difficult steps or something like dancers do. They work on floors that have a give to them, this sort of thing. Well, horses are the same way, and they need that trying to give underneath them. So just know that always does affect them a bit, as we've already seen with him stumble a few times and this sort of thing, and in the footing that you're riding on. But you're doing a good job so far here, what I see. Of course, your walk work could get even a little longer, a little stretchier and deeper, when you're not, maybe you cut that off a little bit just by virtue of the fact that you're videotaping yourself here. But know that you can, it's hard to spend too much time in the walk. You can spend plenty of it, and especially when you're not on good footing like you have here, where, I mean, you've got tufts of grass coming up, you've got rocks, you've got a lot of manure out there that's going to be slippery. So all those things are going to affect how your horse is going to go and how much we can, sort of expect the horse to do on any given day, so to speak. And of course, you can also see how dry it is if the dust is coming up, but we can also see that there's just not any give in that footing. So take that into consideration. So I would have liked to have seen a longer, even deeper stretch in the walk work there, and just getting it more consistent and more active. And that's the good thing, it's hard to do too much in the walk. We can do an hour of really walk stretchy work without bothering the horse at all. And once again, you see how you have the horse stumbling there. That's not because of what you're doing. It's because of the footing that you're riding on. So anytime you have an inconsistent footing, you can just, or very hard footing, you can just count on the fact the horse is going to stumble and trip occasionally. Once again, especially when we're trying to get them to work in big maximum open gaits. So we have to take that in consideration. Your trot work here is not bad. The horse is starting to swing through. Could still stretch a little deeper. I still feel like he's holding back a little bit in that neck, and it could get a little longer and a little deeper. We can see when the horse goes by there that, this horse is fairly straight behind. We don't see a lot of flexion in the hocks, but it gets better at times than others. That's starting to look really quite nice there. So you're well on your way to doing a good job with this horse. And as I said, just know that all you have to do to improve the horse's bend is continue doing what you're doing. As the horse gets stronger and can lift the back higher, the bend will come all by itself. We cannot force a horse to bend. I see people, frustratingly trying to do that all the time, and trainers, making them pull the neck way to the inside and make them bend. That doesn't make them bend. It only just bends the neck. So once again, seeing this horse in silhouette, you see the dip behind the saddle here and how this horse has a bit of a hunter's bump there, which tells us the horse hasn't been working through its back. And that doesn't mean, this horse was a wild horse when you got it and hadn't been worked at all, but that doesn't mean it's working through its back. Unfortunately, many of the wild horse herds, live in very desert environments, which is not a good environment for a horse. It's not where horses, develop. They developed in marshlands. That's why they have the big wide feet that they have. So, the desert is not a great place for horses. The horses that have been bred there, like Arabs were originally, actually, that's why they do so well. They have a good cooling system, and those horses are used to a lot of heat because that's where they were bred, and they were bred a bit, they're a bit straight, so it's easy for them they pull their knees up. It's easy for them to work in deep sand, easier than, a big warm blood with modern gaits is going to do. So just know that this always makes a big difference in how much you're going to get done and how quickly in terms of that, in terms of working horses on footing that isn't fantastic. But as I said before, so far what I'm seeing here is quite good work. I'd like to see the stretch a little deeper yet, even in the walk and the trot. But you're well on your way to getting there. But you can see how, like right there, the horse kind of sucks back, and you see how the bottom of the neck kind of becomes thicker as the horse does suck back. But as I said, that can be a part of the problem of the footing that you're riding the horse on. Now, I can't see whether the horse has shoes on or not, but especially if you are, riding in footing the way you are working here, it's very important that the horse have shoes on, because there are very few horses that could stand up over time to being worked on this kind of poor footing. So the shoes, remember, are there to give the horse a little protection. So if you don't have the horse shod, that's something that I would certainly be thinking about if I were working a horse, once again, in this kind of an environment. We can see here when the horse's head is up, if you look carefully, you can pretty much see how the horse is kind of stabbing the front legs and pulling itself along. Gets a little better there. And has some degree of flexion in the hocks, but it's still very flat-footed. There's not really any push-up into the back yet. Remember that collection is the degree to which the thrust of the hind leg That thrust as it pushes off pushes up into the back and lifts the front end into the air. That's what makes the horse light in front and lets the shoulders swing freely. And of course, we'll make any horse that's, a lesser mover look like it's a better mover than it is. So all of them we can always improve. And in other words, any horse that's not over its back is going to improve its gaits immensely, probably at least by 50%, just by getting the horse to work up over its back. So while this is not totally high-headed, it's not deep enough yet to see much of that swing. But the horse is at least moving its leg fairly together. The horse isn't just letting its back end fall out behind it. So you've definitely done some good things here. It just still needs to get into a deeper stretch in order to get to the point where this horse is going to actually be able to bend. I would love to see you do some groundwork and some lunging work with this horse to see if you, the work in hand and lunging, if you can't get the horse working a little deeper into the stretch. There you go, like in the walk. Like that's more like where we need to get this horse to be, is way down and out like that. And you can see how when it does there, how the walk improves. All of a sudden the horse steps a little further through on those inside hind legs and looks much improved. You have a pretty good position yourself on the back of the horse. Just remember to straighten up. Always try to flatten your shoulder blades into the back and lift your chest a little bit so that we don't develop that sort of rounded shoulders riding that so many people have. The more we lift up, see, that's there, your shoulders are just a little bit forward. You need to just lift your chest. In other words, like a person with good posture, think of it that way, standing with good posture with a horse between your legs. That's one way of thinking about it. And of course, we don't want our posture to be too stiff, like a stiff soldier standing at attention, but we want our back to be straight and our shoulder blades folded into our back and our head lifted up on top of our shoulders a little bit with our chest lifted. And of course, keeping your abdominal muscles engaged all of the time. But beyond that, your position looks quite good. You're keeping your heels down and your toes lifted. Legs are fairly underneath you. And this is all pretty good. It's just not quite deep enough to get to where you want to be yet, but that's much better. And we can see this horse has a nice active trot. It's going to have a good gait. So once you really get this horse working completely over its back, I think you'll have a very nice horse here. I've worked with quite a few wild horses, some who were quite dangerous, but you certainly look like you've done a good job with what you've done here. With this one, he's coming along quite nicely. And of course, by the fact that you're not conflicting your aids, the horse is going along with what you want it to do quite well. In other words, you're not trying to pull it into a bad frame, which is unfortunately the fate of so many horses today. Pretty good swing there. So basically, this is all pretty good, just not quite deep enough. Here's your canter, which is not a bad canter. This is a good enough canter that you can canter. As I say, if the horse is really cross-cantering or really just falling on its forehand, then we can't do much cantering until we get the horse sound enough to at least work through its back a little bit to the degree that this one is doing and stay united, which it's doing quite well. So this is all good, and I'd say stick with your canter work here a little bit. And that's all pretty good. Actually, this horse actually canters a little better than it trots at this moment. It actually swings through and gets a little less on its forehand. So once we get a horse to that phase in the canter, it's perfectly fine to canter because it will improve everything else once the horse can actually canter over its back. But if a horse's canter is so bad that it literally cannot maintain balance or cross canters or feel like you're going to fall over every time around a corner, that's the kind of canter that we need to do more strengthening. Now look how much better the trot looks there. Now you're getting this horse into a good place. So a little bit of activity that you created with the canter work got you a little more impulsion, a little more energy, so to speak, flowing through the horse, and you're getting a much better trot here now. And that's more like where we need it to be. It can even get a little bit deeper than you have it there, but that guy had a few moments that really got to a good place. Now he just starts to pull a little bit much again. Lost you there for a moment. I'm coming back to the canter. I like how relaxed the horse is about the canter. As I said, this horse seems to canter a little better than it trots, and that little bit of cantering seemed to help the trot a great deal. So by all means, do it. Don't do a lot of it. In other words, little short bits of canter is what you want to do, like you've done here. Just a couple of circles around, then come back. And it's, again, the fact that the horse gets a little more energy flowing through it. The trot looks a little better right there for just a moment before he popped up again. But that little bit of canter seems to help this horse, so that's a good thing. But you see right there, he just stepped on a rock and went lame. So that's the result of the footing that you're riding in there. So I would, the biggest thing I can tell you here is, I don't know if this is the only place you have to board, but, this is really not ground that that you want to work on too much, and you're going to have to really be careful with it because you can really lame a horse up on this kind of footing. But you always just have to take it a little bit easy. So the fact that the horse went off so much there at that moment made me think that maybe you don't have shoes. I can't tell from this video whether this horse has shoes on or not, but if it doesn't have shoes on, it should certainly get them soon, working on the ground that you're working on. Remember, that's what the shoes are for, is to protect the horse's feet. Not a bad canter, but this is starting now. As we went on there, this canter started to look worse. He started to look like he was bracing on his front feet. So maybe after stepping on whatever he stepped on there a couple of moments ago, that began to get him to be a little. Now that's getting to be a better trot there. That's much more like where we needed to get it to be to improve that back. Like that. So as I said, that last little canter, he actually started to get worse as you went on there, as the horse started to prop against its front legs instead of letting itself swing forward. So whatever you stepped on there a few moments ago, that the horse took a few off steps, that may have made the horse, a little bit cautious about what it's doing there for a moment, and starts to suck back a little bit in the canter. But now your swing in the trot here is looking much better. This is much more like what we're looking for. Seeing a little more flexion of the hocks there once he starts to stretch the neck out more forward. And of course, that means the horse is going to start pushing up into the back a little more. Yeah, pretty good there. That's where we need to get them to. So you've done a good job. If you get to there, you will find that when you can get that last sort of trot that you just had, and it can stay there consistently in that lower position of the head and neck, and the walk even looks better now, how much better your suppleness will start to come. Once again, the only way to solve the suppleness, the lateral suppleness, is longitudinal suppleness. That means the lift of the horse's back. So the back must always lift up before it can bend from side to side. So don't worry about it beyond that. Just keep trying to work the horse in the frame that's going to allow it to develop the strength to lift its back correctly, which is also why we do quite a bit of work in the beginning without anything on the horse or without any weight, doing the lunge line of the work and hand work. Because we get a horse a chance to build enough strength to be able to lift its back before we ask it to actually do it. That is, with the weight in the saddle. So I think you've done a really good job here. This horse looks really quite nice, and for a wild horse, and once again, these wild horses can be very, very nice. I've trained quite a few of them in my life. As I said, some of them who were quite dangerous, but all the ones I trained ended up being fine, and most of them were actually quite good movers, as this one is. I mean, he's not a 10, but he's certainly a 5 or 6, which is a long way to getting there. What we always try to avoid is horses that are really straight behind, and this horse is not overly straight behind. That is, horses, what I mean by that, horses that really cannot flex their hocks at all. Those are always the most difficult horses to train. We find a lot of that in some of the older Western breeds, the paint horses and Appaloosas, of course. Now, of course, they have improved them in many cases, but still it's hard to find one that's really got fantastic back end. So really good job here. Continue with what you're doing. Get the stretch deeper in all things, and you'll find that your lateral bend will start to come from that. There is no other way to do it. There's no way to force lateral bend or any other kind of exercise. If it's every exercise must be to get the horse to lift its back, that will allow it to bend. Now here, this is too short with the neck up too high. You can see how the back end is just falling out behind now, so that is an undesirable walk. So you're probably trying to do a little lateral work there, it looks like. But at that point, when it becomes that sticky, you want to just let the neck right back out and let the horse walk out. So great job here, and it shows a horse with a lot of potential. Once again, I'd get some shoes on this horse if you don't have them on it, and if it's possible to improve where you ride over the footing here, I would say try to find a better place to school your horse than what you have here. But if you can't, just be assured at least that you're getting some shoes on this horse if you don't have them on there now, and be careful. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Great job. I love people saving these horses. And many of them are very good. Some are dangerous, some not. But we always have to take our time with all horses. So I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Great job. Good walk there. That's getting much better there. That's what we're looking for. The deeper you get that stretch, the more the back comes up.